For decades, Hulk Hogan wasn't just a wrestler. He was an institution, a symbol etched into the childhood memories of millions, a larger-than-life presence who built his world to match his persona. So when reports began circulating that federal authorities were taking a closer look at his Florida estate after his passing in July 2025, most people assumed it was routine. Paperwork, assets, the quiet business of death that happens behind closed doors and fades from memory. But the people who walked that property say it didn't feel routine at all. They noticed things that refused to line up, measurements that contradicted the blueprints, space that existed on paper but couldn't be found. And slowly a question began to form, one that transformed a mansion millions thought they knew into something far more unsettling. This wasn't a staged prop or a publicity stunt. This was something buried. The house fans remember from Hogan Knows Best wasn't built on impulse. It was built with obsessive intention. Back in the early 90s when Hulkamania was at its peak, Hogan purchased a waterfront lot in Bel Air with a vision of creating a family sanctuary. What rose from that ground over nearly 8 years was a sprawling French-inspired estate designed down to the smallest architectural detail. His wife Linda spent years studying Parisian farmhouse design, determined to recreate old-world elegance on Florida's Gulf Coast. At the time, it seemed like passion. In hindsight, some now wonder if it was also camouflage. Above ground, everything felt theatrical in the way celebrity homes often do. A cascading pool overlooking the intercoastal waterway. Views stretching from Clearwater Beach to the open Gulf. A private dock where jet skis and boats lifted silently from the water. All of it looked like luxury earned and displayed. All of it made sense for a man who lived his entire life in the spotlight. But investigators have quietly questioned whether that same waterfront location offered something else entirely. Privacy that money couldn't usually buy. Mobility that most homes simply don't provide. Access that disappeared into the water and left no trace. Inside, the house was a maze designed to look like elegance. Service corridors connected rooms without drawing attention. A butler's pantry allowed movement between wings that guests would never notice. The four-car garage sat positioned away from the main entrance, shielded from casual view. Even the gym and tanning rooms were constructed in ways that muffled sound. On camera, it was just a beautiful home. Off camera, it may have been engineered for something far more deliberate. What makes this impossible to dismiss is the timing. During the years when reality television cameras captured every corner of that house, the property was never more visible, and that visibility may have been the perfect shield. When a place is constantly filmed, documented, and broadcast to millions, suspicion evaporates, crew members coming and going at all hours, schedules locked into predictable rhythms, equipment trucks and production vehicles creating constant motion. It becomes remarkably easy to imagine how unusual activity could disappear into that noise, hidden not by secrecy, but by overwhelming openness. This pattern isn't unprecedented. Hollywood history is full of architectural secrets that only surfaced decades later. The Playboy Mansion became infamous after archived documents suggested underground tunnels connecting neighboring celebrity properties. Some claimed they were actively used. Others insisted they were sealed before serving any purpose. The truth remains buried. In 2023, public permits revealed that Mark Zuckerberg was constructing an underground facility beneath his Hawaii compound, complete with escape hatches and reinforced blast doors. He dismissed it as a modest shelter. The public imagination had already raced far beyond his explanation. Even David and Victoria Beckham faced scrutiny when planning documents revealed an underground tunnel proposed for their English estate. Nothing hidden, everything properly filed. And still, it shocked people who thought they understood the boundaries of celebrity excess. Through that lens, the whispers surrounding Hogan's mansion don't seem impossible. They seem almost inevitable. What complicates everything is the family itself. Long before any tunnel entered the conversation, the cracks were already spreading. The 2007 divorce between Hulk and Linda wasn't just emotionally devastating, it was financially catastrophic. Legal battles consumed years. The housing market collapsed at the worst possible moment. The mansion that once symbolized success became an anchor dragging everyone down. Listed at $25 million, it sat unsold as the price dropped again and again, finally selling years later for a fraction of its original value. On television, viewers watched what appeared to be genuine pain, Linda questioning her future, the children struggling to find their footing in a world that was crumbling around them. It felt uncomfortably real. And perhaps it was. Or perhaps, as investigators now speculate, that public unraveling served a secondary purpose, a distraction so consuming that no one thought to look anywhere else. Here's what lingers in the silence. If even a fraction of these suspicions hold weight, then the story we thought we knew about the Hogan family was carefully curated long before any television producer touched the footage. A smiling family brand engineered for public consumption. Something far more complicated operating beneath the surface. And the most disturbing realization isn't the possibility of hidden architecture. It's the understanding that the spotlight we trust to reveal everything can become the very thing that conceals the truth. That's why the story refuses to fade. Because it isn't really about wrestling or fame or secret construction projects. It's about how completely we accept the stories we're shown and how much might still be buried just beyond the frame. The financial trajectory should have ended everything. A loss approaching $6 million on the Bel Air mansion is the kind of devastation that destroys families, even famous ones. The mathematics of real estate don't negotiate, they don't bend for celebrity. And yet, almost before that sale closed, something happened that made investigators pause. Within days, Hulk Hogan had secured another luxury waterfront property in Clearwater Beach for $3.3 million. No recovery period, no visible struggle, no explanation for where that money originated. That kind of rebound doesn't happen by accident. Not without income flowing from somewhere the public never saw. And that's where federal attention reportedly shifted from surface-level celebrity finances to deeper questions, including whether revenue streams existed that never crossed the desk of the Internal Revenue Service. What troubled investigators most wasn't simply the money, it was who appeared closest to managing it. At the center of those questions stood Brooke Hogan, someone the public had always perceived as sheltered, protected, perhaps even controlled, beyond what seemed healthy. On television, she was the daughter living under strict rules and suffocating curfews that extended far past what most teenagers experienced. She once mentioned, almost as a joke, that she was nearly 18 and had never had a boyfriend. Her father's response wasn't concern, it was approval. At the time, it read as overprotectiveness from a famous father navigating an impossible situation. In retrospect, investigators see something more calculated. Isolation has a way of manufacturing loyalty. When your entire world is small and controlled, family approval becomes oxygen. Questioning unusual behavior becomes unthinkable. Saying no becomes impossible. That context reframes how Brooke handled public crises later, when her father's racist remarks surfaced in 2015 and threatened to destroy everything he had built. The family response wasn't chaotic or defensive, it was polished. Coordinated, Brooke stepped forward with a carefully structured defense that acknowledged wrongdoing while steering consequences away from permanent damage. It didn't sound like panic. It sounded rehearsed. What raised immediate flags was how prepared she appeared. Investigators noted that she referenced transcripts of private conversations, access most children would never possess. That single detail suggested meticulous documentation inside the household, a practice more consistent with operational security than ordinary family life. Later, Hulk Hogan himself admitted something that reframed the entire episode. His anger, he confessed, was never really about the man Brooke was dating. It was about Brooke herself, about losing control, about fear of what might happen if she slipped beyond his reach. He described how she immediately forgave him, reaffirming her loyalty without hesitation. To investigators, that moment read less like genuine reconciliation and more like conditioning functioning exactly as designed. Other fractures had already begun spreading beneath the surface. Hogan spoke openly about his prescription pill addiction following multiple spinal surgeries. He described doctors who kept refilling prescriptions without question. Pharmacies had called him when new medication was ready. During those years, his judgment was compromised, his physical pain constant and overwhelming. Investigators now question how someone in that diminished state remained capable of managing complex financial and logistical decisions without significant external support. The most painful revelations emerged much later. In 2025, Brooke publicly alleged years of verbal, mental, and occasional physical abuse at the hands of both parents. She didn't describe isolated incidents or heated arguments. She described patterns, systems designed to enforce compliance rather than build trust, control mechanisms that shaped her entire understanding of family loyalty. To investigators, those claims align disturbingly well with what would be required to maintain secrecy under sustained pressure. Her decision in 2023 to formally request removal from her father's will suddenly appeared in a different light. Not a financial dispute between relatives, an escape attempt, a way to create legal and emotional distance before scrutiny intensified, before loyalty became liability. None of this constitutes proof, but assembled together, it creates a portrait that refuses to sit quietly. A family that appeared to collapse publicly while privately maintaining financial momentum. A daughter raised inside a carefully managed environment, then deployed to defend it when the walls started closing in. And the question that echoes long after the headlines move on. How much of what we witnessed was genuine? How much was engineered to keep us from looking beneath the surface? When Brooke said she was trying to protect her father from people taking advantage of him, it sounded like a daughter defending a vulnerable parent from circling vultures. But in the version investigators are constructing, that sentence carries a second meaning, a warning disguised as loyalty. A message that says, without saying, that outsiders don't understand what's actually at stake. Luna's response only amplified the tension. Instead of softening or seeking reconciliation, she attacked, called the allegations ridiculous, threatened legal action, labeled her own daughter a narcissist. This wasn't the response of a family attempting to heal. This was scorched earth, the reaction of people who feel cornered and will destroy anything necessary to maintain control of the narrative. That dynamic keeps surfacing in conversations surrounding this case. If the mansion was a symbol, the family structure was the lock on the door. Fear, dependency, guilt, and manufactured loyalty are remarkably effective tools. When a household operates on those principles, secrecy stops feeling like secrecy. It just feels like survival. The federal interest didn't begin with dramatic raids or movie-style confrontations. It began with paperwork. The slow, tedious process that follows every death when estates must be sorted and assets accounted for. After Hulk Hogan's passing on July 24, 2025, local reports described Clearwater emergency responders arriving at his Clearwater Beach home for a medical emergency. Initial statements indicated no signs of foul play, cardiac arrest, a heart attack following decades of accumulated physical damage. The health context matters because it explains why interpretations diverge so sharply. Hogan's body had endured years of punishment. In interviews, he described how brutal the old wrestling rings were, how injuries compounded, how surgeries accumulated. Friends worried he pushed too hard even when his body demanded rest. By 2025, he was still moving like a man trying to outrun time. Promoting projects, maintaining visibility, acting as though the machine could keep running if he just refused to stop feeding it. For some people, the tunnel narrative became a magnet for every unanswered question. If you already believe secrets were buried, his death becomes part of the story. If you don't, his death is a tragedy explained by decades of physical destruction. Without verified law enforcement documentation, treating the most extreme claims as established fact remains irresponsible, particularly when so much of what circulates online originates from commentary videos designed to sound authoritative or strip away the sensationalism, and a genuine emotional foundation remains. A family that publicly disintegrated while quietly maintaining financial stability. a daughter who described years of systematic abuse, a mother who denied everything and counterattacked with fury. That part isn't speculation. It's documented in public statements, interviews, and legal filings. The money trail is where investigators traditionally focus when celebrity mythology generates noise. The Bel Air mansion, selling for roughly $6 million after being listed far higher, has been confirmed. It's precisely the kind of financial collapse that makes people ask how the lifestyle continued unchanged. That question sharpens considerably when you examine Brooke's timing. Her request to be removed from her father's will came in 2023, precisely as reports suggest federal scrutiny around the family was intensifying. She explained it publicly as an attempt to avoid future chaos, a preemptive step to stay clear of whatever might unfold after he was gone. Whether you interpret that as self-protection from family dysfunction or something more strategic, the emotional motivation she described was unmistakable. She wanted out of the blast radius before the explosion. Two narratives now run parallel, and the friction between them generates the gravity that keeps people watching. One narrative is verified and public. A famous body, battered by decades of performance, finally surrendered. A family feud erupted into public view with accusations and denials flying in both directions. An estate entered probate while the public began stitching meaning into every visible crack. The other narrative is viral and unconfirmed. Hidden tunnels and federal investigations. Secret networks and coded warnings.
An underground thriller that plays perfectly on a suspicion that we never really knew what was happening behind the curtain. The responsible approach isn't pretending the viral story is confirmed. It's treating it as what it actually is. A claim people are obsessed with, a mirror reflecting something uncomfortably real about how a family under pressure can turn on itself.
How control can disguise itself as protection. How fame provides the strangest kind of camouflage. The mathematics create their own questions. Over his career, Hulk Hogan earned tens of billions from wrestling alone. Ad films, endorsements, appearances, and licensing, and early estimates place a total somewhere between $20 and $30 million. Enough for a comfortable life. Enough to explain the visible success, but the genuine financial inflection point came later. In 2016, Hogan sued Gawker for publishing private material without consent. The verdict shocked everyone. $140 million initially awarded, eventually settling around $31 million after legal expenses. That case injected massive capital into Hogan's world. Then came the side ventures, branded merchandise, a beach shop bearing his name, a beer brand, each one adding another revenue layer. By some calculations, Hogan may have accumulated well over $100 million during that final stretch of his career. And yet, by the time he died, reports suggested his net worth had contracted to roughly $25 million. That gap between what flowed in and what remained is precisely what keeps investigators, analysts, and amateur detectives asking questions that refuse to resolve. Fame does something peculiar to suspicion. When you're a cultural icon, people stop wondering how things function behind closed doors. Hogan wasn't merely famous, he was familiar. Lunchboxes and action figures, Halloween costumes and catchphrases embedded in the collective memory. That kind of hero status becomes the perfect camouflage. Who would ever scrutinize the mansion of America's wrestling legend? Who would imagine anything hidden behind a house that once starred in its own television series? The claims don't end with the Bel Air property. According to reports circulating around the investigation, whatever operation existed didn't terminate when that mansion sold in 2012. The Clearwater Beach home, purchased almost immediately afterward, reportedly featured architectural modifications that again emphasized waterfront access and acoustic privacy. Some sources claim ground-penetrating surveys identified anomalies beneath the foundation that appeared structurally similar to what investigators suspected at the previous residence. That timing matters. The scope of scrutiny is reportedly expanded. Associates, business partners, longtime family connections, even archive footage from Hogan Knows Best is allegedly being re-examined, not for entertainment value, but for patterns, unusual language, unexplained routines. Moments that seemed innocent during broadcast but might reveal something different under focused analysis. What began with architectural inconsistencies has grown into something far more comprehensive. A coordinated effort, according to reports, attempting to understand how celebrity, family control, and meticulously constructed public personas can function as shields, not just for fame. For secrets that were never meant to surface, that's the uncomfortable ground where this story now rests. If these claims continue gaining traction, Hulkamania may never carry the same meaning again. The red and yellow iconography fans grew up worshiping could become permanently entangled with questions no one wanted to ask. Or, equally possible, everything could collapse under scrutiny, leaving only a cautionary tale about how easily mythology fills the spaces where trust runs deep. Because the question that lands with the most weight isn't whether there was a tunnel, it's this. If your entire existence is built on making people believe in a character, what happens when the paperwork finally demands the real numbers?